imagine quitting your job, to chase after that entrepreneurial dream, the one you've always had. But then instead of finding success right away, you're stuck struggling for years. What if there was a way to kind of skip past all that pain, to get to your goals faster? That's kind of what we're going to try to do today. We're going to be exploring the insights of this entrepreneur. I mean, he hasn't just built and scaled businesses himself. He's helped tons of other people turn their companies into like $1 million successes.
I'm excited to be here, and share what I've learned, both from my own experiences, but also from watching other people find success. I've sort of seen the patterns. I
got to say, going through the stuff you shared, one thing that really stood out to me was how much you emphasized like the emotional side of entrepreneurship, the psychology of it, Lots of people talk about tactics, strategies, business plans, but you really get that it all starts with your mindset.
It's funny you should say that, because I used to be one of those people. I used to think it was all about having the right idea, the perfect plan. But over time, I've learned that the biggest obstacles are usually internal. Fear, self-doubt, worrying what other people think. That's the stuff that really holds people back. And one of the most common fears I see is this like vague terror of failing.
Yeah, it's like they'd rather stick with something they hate than risk the unknown, even if that unknown could be amazing.
Exactly. And I think a lot of it comes down to how our brains are wired. Our brains are wired to avoid uncertainty, to stay with what's familiar, even if it's not good for us. So one of the first things I tell people is to really face that fear. I actually use the word coward on purpose.
Wow, that's a strong word.
It is. But I think it's important because it makes us admit that we're choosing fear over action. It's not about getting rid of fear completely. It's about learning to act even though you're scared. And a good way to do that is to be specific about what you're actually afraid of.
So instead of saying, I'm scared to start a business, you'd have them ask, what exactly am I scared of? What's the absolute worst thing that could happen?
Exactly. Because when you take those vague fears and break them down into real scenarios, they usually lose their power. Like, say someone is afraid to quit their job to start a business. They might think, I'll lose everything, everyone will think I'm a failure, I'll end up living under a bridge. But when you really look at those fears, you realize they're usually not realistic.
So you're encouraging people to go from that like gut feeling of fear to a more like logical, analytical approach.
Exactly. When you do that, the monsters in your head, they sort of shrink down to a size you can handle. And once you've started dealing with those things inside, then you can start focusing on the stuff outside, like figuring out what kind of business to start.
Right. Because I imagine that's the next big question. Okay, I want to be an entrepreneur, but what kind of business should I actually start?
I get asked that all the time. And one framework I find helpful is what I call the 3 Ps: pain, profession, and passion.
Okay, so let's break those down. What do you mean by pain?
Pain is a problem you've actually experienced yourself, and you're really motivated to solve it. It's about using that deep knowledge that comes from your own struggles.
So it's not just finding a problem in the market. It's finding a problem that you've lived through, that you really understand.
Exactly. I'll give you an example. I met this woman once who had spent years trying to find stylish clothes for her teenage daughter. Her daughter had a sensory processing disorder, and she knew how frustrating that could be, both for her daughter and for other families going through the same thing. So she started an online store for sensory-friendly clothes, specifically for teenagers and young adults.
That's perfect. A personal problem turned into a great business idea.
And the great thing about doing it this way is you're not just using market research. You're drawing on your own experiences, your own empathy. You get your target market because you are your target market.
Yeah, and that authenticity can be really powerful for customers. They can feel that you're not just trying to sell them something. You're genuinely trying to solve a problem you understand deeply. What about that second P? Profession.
Profession is all about using the skills and experience you got from your past jobs. It's a good way to start a business because you're not starting from nothing. You're building on skills and knowledge you already have.
So like if someone was a graphic designer for a marketing agency for years, they could use that to start their own freelance design business or even their own agency.
Exactly. The key is to figure out which skills you can transfer and use them in a new market or to solve a new problem.
And the third P, passion. That's probably the one people are most familiar with. Taking your hobbies, your big interest, and making a business out of them.
Exactly. And while passion is super important, you got to be strategic about it. It's not enough to just love something. You need to figure out how to make it a real business. I always ask people, is there a market for this? Can you make something unique and valuable that people will actually pay for?
So it's not just about doing what you love. It's about finding that sweet spot between what you love, what you're good at, and what the market needs.
Exactly. That's where the magic happens.
I know you've said you don't need all 3 Ps for a business to succeed. Sometimes one really strong one is enough.
That's right. If you've got this burning passion and it lines up with a real need in the market, that's a great place to start. Or if you've spent years getting really good at something and you're ready to go out on your own, that's a solid base too.
So our listeners figured out their pain point, their profession, or their passion, and they're feeling that entrepreneurial fire. What's the next big step they need to take?
One thing that people often don't think about enough is the importance of building attention. You could have the best idea ever, the most amazing product, but if nobody knows about it, it doesn't really matter. And these days, with everything online, building a strong personal brand is like absolutely key.
It's funny you say that because I was actually reading this article just the other day about how attention is the new currency. We're hit with so much information all the time. It's harder than ever to, actually get noticed.
That's so true. And it's not just about getting attention, it's about getting the right kind of attention. It's got to be from people who get what you're saying, who connect with your message, your values, your vision.
And that's where personal branding comes in, right? Showing off your personality, what you're good at, your story, but in a way that really connects with the people you want to reach.
Exactly. And I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to be everything to everyone. Like they try to please everybody and it just ends up watering down their message. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got was from my wife. I was feeling down because I'd gotten some negative comments online about something I'd posted, and I was starting to second guess myself. Like maybe I should just play it safe, not say anything that could be controversial. And my wife just looked at me and said, "Never dilute yourself." What she meant was, if you really want to make an impact, you got to be okay with some people disagreeing with you.
So instead of being afraid to share your perspective, you should actually really emphasize it.
Yeah, exactly. Because the people who are drawn to that, to the real you, those are the ones who are going to become your biggest supporters. They'll be your loyal fans, customers, the people who really advocate for you.
It's about finding your people, the ones who get you, who like your quirks, who value what you have to say.
And a powerful way to connect with those people is through stories. People connect with stories on an emotional level. They want to know your why, your journey, what drives you.
So much more interesting than just listing what you've done or using all that marketing jargon.
Totally agree. And I've found that the best stories are the ones that show a little vulnerability. Might seem counterintuitive, but sharing your struggles, your setbacks, even times you doubted yourself, that's the stuff that makes you relatable. That creates a real human connection.
It's like taking off that mask of perfection we all try to wear. Let people see the real you.
Right. And when you do that, you make it okay for others to do the same. It builds a community based on honesty and shared experiences.
So you've laid the groundwork. You're starting to get some attention. You're connecting with the right people. What's next in the entrepreneurial journey?
One of the most important things to realize is that entrepreneurship isn't a straight line. It's a cycle with ups and downs, twists and turns. And I've actually identified 6 distinct stages in this cycle. The first one is what I call uninformed optimism. That's that honeymoon phase. Everything's exciting, so much potential, you're full of ideas, and you're sure that success is right around the corner.
It's that initial rush before reality sets in.
Exactly. And then, you hit some bumps in the road, things get tougher than you expected, you run into challenges you didn't see coming, and this is where you enter the second stage. I call it informed pessimism.
You start to realize building a business isn't always easy or fun.
Right. And this is a really critical point because this is where a lot of people give up. They hit that first obstacle and they think, maybe this isn't for me. But the thing is, every successful entrepreneur has been through this stage. It's just part of the process.
So the important thing is to keep going. Push through that doubt and discouragement.
Exactly. And if you do, you'll eventually get to the third stage. I call this the crisis of meaning, or sometimes the valley of despair. This is where things get really, really tough. Long hours, working your butt off, but not seeing the results you hoped for. You start questioning your abilities, your choices, your sanity even. I remember when I was going through this stage, it was brutal. I felt like I was banging my head against a wall, working harder than ever, but getting nowhere.
That sounds incredibly demoralizing. How did you get through it?
Honestly, there were definitely times I wanted to quit. But deep down, I had this belief that I was meant for something more. And I knew that if I gave up, I'd always wonder, what if?
So you kept going, even when it felt impossible.
I did, and I'm so glad I did, because eventually I started to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I got to the fourth stage, which I call informed optimism.
That sounds much better.
It is. This is where you start seeing the results of all your hard work. You've learned from your mistakes, you've gotten better at what you do, and you're starting to gain some traction. You feel that optimism again, but this time it's based on something real. You're not just hoping, you're optimistic, because you're actually seeing that your efforts are paying off.
It's like you finally turned a corner and you're on the right track.
Exactly. And this is where things start to get really exciting. You're building momentum, getting customers, making real progress towards your goals. And eventually you reach the fifth stage, success. But it's important to remember that success isn't a destination, it's a journey.
You can't just sit back and relax once you hit your goals.
Right. You got to keep learning, keep growing, keep getting better. And that takes you to the final stage, significance. This is where you're not just successful yourself, but you're actually making a real impact on the world. You're using your business, your platform, your influence to create positive change, to leave a legacy.
That's amazing. So it's about going beyond just making money or reaching personal goals. It's about using your success to make a real difference.
Exactly. And I think every entrepreneur has the potential to get to this stage. It doesn't matter how big your business is or how much money you make. It's about the impact you have, the value you bring to the world.
It's inspiring to think that even a small business can have a huge impact if it's driven by a purpose bigger than itself.
I couldn't agree more. And it's also important to remember that this cycle, it's not always a straight line. You'll probably have setbacks, you might have to change directions, you might even go back to a previous stage sometimes. But the key is to keep moving forward, keep learning, and never give up on your dream.
We've talked a lot about mindset and the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur, but building a business is rarely a solo thing, right? You talk a lot about the importance of building a great team. Why is that so crucial?
You know, I truly believe that how successful a company can be comes down to the brain power of its people.
Like that saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Exactly. And when you have a team of talented, passionate, driven people all working towards the same goal, the possibilities are huge. One concept that helps me understand how teams work is what I call the square root rule.
Okay, I'm curious. Tell me more about that.
The square root rule basically says that in any company, a small group of employees usually create most of the value.
So like if you have 100 people, maybe just 10 of them are responsible for 50% of the value created. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's the basic idea. Now, this doesn't mean the other 90 people aren't important or contributing, but it shows how vital it is to find and keep top talent. These are the people I call the A players. They're the ones driving innovation, solving tough problems, and making everyone around them better.
Those are the people you want on your team. But hiring can be really hard, especially for someone starting their first business who might not have a lot of experience figuring out who the best performers are. What advice would you give someone building their first team?
Honestly, the best advice I can give is to assume that you're bad at hiring.
That's interesting. You're saying don't think you know what you're doing, even if you've been successful before.
Right. It's about admitting that you have biases and limitations, and then putting systems in place to help avoid those pitfalls.
So what are some of those systems? What can someone do to improve their hiring process?
One of the most effective things is to not try to make all the hiring decisions yourself. Involve other experts, especially those who have a track record of finding great talent.
So, like, if you're hiring a software developer, you might include not just yourself in the interviews, but also a couple of experienced software engineers so they can really assess the candidate's skills.
Exactly. You're using their expertise to make a better decision.
It's like crowdsourcing your hiring process, getting input from different perspectives.
And another really important thing is to do thorough reference checks. Don't just rely on what the candidate tells you. Talk to people who've actually worked with them. Get their honest opinion. See if what they say matches what you've seen.
It's about getting a complete picture of the candidate, not just the polished version they present in an interview.
Right. And one hiring strategy I really like is what I call the barbell approach.
Barbell approach, what's that?
It's about focusing on two types of people. Young, hungry individuals who are eager to learn and grow, and then experienced professionals who bring a ton of knowledge and expertise.
So you're building a team with a mix of fresh ideas and seasoned experience.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, these two groups often work really well together. The young talent brings energy, enthusiasm, a willingness to learn, while the experienced people offer mentorship, guidance, and a deep understanding of the industry.
But what about those people in the middle of their careers? How do you know if they're really passionate about the work or if they're just trying to climb the corporate ladder?
That's a good point. I mean, there are definitely talented and passionate people in that mid-career range, but I think it's good to be aware of the potential downsides. I call the ones who are mostly focused on getting ahead careerists. They're not necessarily passionate about the work itself or the company's mission. They're more interested in titles, promotions, and their own personal gain.
So how do you avoid hiring one of those careerists by mistake?
One way is to look for signs of real passion in their past work. Did they take on projects beyond what was required? Did they go above and beyond to make a difference? Another thing to look for is their willingness to learn and grow. Are they curious? Do they ask good questions? Are they eager for new challenges?
It's about looking beyond the resume and trying to get a sense of their character, their values, what motivates them.
Exactly. Because you're not just hiring someone to do a job, you're bringing them into your company culture, your team.
You're building a tribe, a group of people who share your vision and who are committed to working together to achieve something amazing.
And that's what makes entrepreneurship so rewarding. It's about more than just building a business. It's about building a community, a legacy, a movement.
We've covered a lot of ground here, from overcoming fear to finding business ideas, to building a brand, to navigating the entrepreneurial life cycle, to the power of people. Is there one final piece of wisdom you want to leave our listener with as they begin their own entrepreneurial journey?
One of the most important things I've learned is that success isn't about being right. It's about constantly adapting and getting better. It's about being humble enough to admit when you're wrong, being willing to learn from your mistakes, and having the courage to keep trying new things until you find what works. I had a friend, he built a multi-million-dollar business through infomercials. He had the means to, move into the digital world, but he held on to what had worked for him in the past. He got comfortable.
That's a classic example of the innovator's dilemma, right? Sometimes success can actually hold you back. It can make you complacent, resistant to change.
It's true. And that's why it's so important to always be learning and experimenting. You got to be willing to try new things, step outside your comfort zone, see failure as a chance to learn. Google actually has this thing called the 70-20-10 rule.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. Tell me more.
They put 70% of their resources into their main business, 20% into related businesses, and 10% into what they call moonshots.
So they're exploring new things all the time, but they're also keeping a strong foundation.
Exactly. They're balancing stability with innovation. And it reminds me of something you mentioned earlier about how important education is.
Yeah, you said education is the best investment for time warping into the future.
It's the ultimate shortcut. You could spend years, even decades, learning by trial and error, making mistakes, slowly gaining knowledge. Or you can learn from people who've already been there, who've already made those mistakes and can share what they've learned.
It's like getting years of experience compressed into a short burst of learning.
Exactly. And you don't even need a formal education for this. It's about actively seeking out mentors, role models, people who embody the qualities you want and have achieved the things you want. And it's not about copying them. It's about understanding the principles behind their success and using those principles in your own way.
So it's not about finding some guru and doing exactly what they say. It's about learning from them, taking the key lessons and adapting them to your own situation.
Exactly. And I think one of the biggest mistakes people make when looking for a mentor is that they want someone to tell them exactly what to do. But the best mentors don't give you answers. They help you ask better questions.
That's a really important point. It's about empowering yourself to find your own solutions, to create your own path.
And that brings us to the idea of being a practitioner, not just a theorist.
Okay, I like that. What's the difference between a pirate and a practitioner?
That's just my way of separating the people who talk the talk from the people who walk the walk. Pirates are the ones who might sound impressive, but they haven't actually done the work. They might read books, go to seminars, but they haven't actually put those ideas into practice.
They're all talk, no action.
Practitioners, on the other hand, are the people who've learned by doing, by experimenting, by trying and failing. They've tested their ideas in the real world, learned from their mistakes, and they really understand what works.
They're the ones who've actually done it and have the experience to show for it.
Exactly. And even if you're just starting out, you can still have that practitioner mindset. It's about seeing every challenge as a chance to learn and grow.
It's about being a student of the game, always looking for feedback, and adjusting your approach based on real results. Can you give an example of how someone could use this practitioner mindset in their business?
Sure. Let's say you're having trouble writing good marketing copy for your website. Instead of just reading a bunch of books about copywriting, you could take a piece of copy you really like and break it down. Look at the structure, the words, the tone.
You're dissecting it, trying to figure out what makes it so effective.
Right. And then you could try to use those same principles in your own writing. Write a few different versions, test them out, see what gets the best results. You're learning by doing, by experimenting, by getting your hands dirty.
And I love that you tie this back to the idea of document, demonstrate, duplicate.
It's such a powerful framework, not just for learning, but for building systems and processes in your business.
Can you remind us what that framework is all about?
Of course. So first, you write down everything you do to successfully complete a task. Say you've figured out how to consistently get leads from social media. You'd break that process down into a step-by-step checklist. Then you show those steps to someone else, walk them through the process, and finally, you have them do those same steps, show you they've got it, and can repeat the process.
So you're not just telling them what to do, you're showing them and then having them show you back.
Exactly. And the interesting thing is when you try to teach something you think you know, you often realize that you don't know it as well as you thought. You might get stuck on a step or realize that your explanation isn't clear. And this forces you to refine your understanding, to fill in the gaps, and to create a process that anyone can follow.
It's like teaching is the best way to learn. It forces you to get clear on your thinking and figure out where your blind spots are.
Right. And it's also super valuable for building a team. When you can document and systematize your processes, you can delegate tasks more effectively, train new people faster, and create a business that can grow and be sustained.
It's about working smarter, not harder.
And it's about freeing up your time and energy to focus on the things only you can do, the things you enjoy most and that have the biggest impact.
So our listeners using this document, demonstrate, duplicate framework, they're learning from their mistakes, they're building a strong team, and they're starting to see some success. But what about the emotional side of entrepreneurship? It's a crazy ride full of ups and downs, and it can be really stressful. How do you deal with that roller coaster? How do you find balance?
That's a great question. And it's something I've definitely struggled with myself over the years. You know, I used to buy into that whole work-life balance thing, the idea that you got to keep your work and your life completely separate. But it never really worked for me. I found that I'm happiest when my work and life are integrated, like when I can bring my whole self to work and when I can use my work to make a positive impact on the world.
But isn't there a risk of burnout if you don't separate those things?
Yeah.
How do you set boundaries and keep work from taking over your whole life?
You're right. There's definitely a risk. That's why you have to be intentional about how you bring your work and life together. I remember thinking back on the days I enjoyed the most, and it was almost always days when I'd worked hard, achieved something meaningful, and then shared those experiences with people I cared about. That's when it hit me. Hard work is the goal.
That's a really powerful insight. So you're not working hard to get some reward or recognition from others. You're finding satisfaction in the work itself.
Exactly. And it's not about glorifying being busy all the time. It's about making sure your work aligns with your values, your passions, your strengths. That's where the real joy and fulfillment come from. I also think it's important to be honest that being an entrepreneur can be really tough. You'll have days where you doubt yourself, where you want to quit, where you feel overwhelmed and stressed. And that's okay. It's normal. The important thing is to have ways to handle those emotions, to take care of yourself, to stay grounded.
So it's not about avoiding those difficult feelings. It's about learning how to handle them, how to deal with the ups and downs.
Right. And it's also about realizing you're not alone in this. There's a whole community of entrepreneurs out there who know exactly what you're going through. Connect with them, share your struggles, learn from each other.
It's about having a support system, a group of people who understand.
And it's also about remembering why you started this in the first place. What was that initial spark that got you excited about this? What impact do you want to make? When you connect back to your purpose, it gives you the energy to keep going, even when things are hard.
That sense of purpose keeps you grounded and focused, even when things are chaotic and uncertain.
I think so. And it's what ultimately leads to a fulfilling and meaningful life, no matter what the outcome.
This has been an incredible conversation. So many valuable insights and practical tips. I know our listeners are going to leave feeling inspired and ready to take their entrepreneurial journey to the next level.
I hope so. It's been great sharing what I've learned.
And to our listeners, remember, the journey is just as important as the destination. Enjoy the ride, embrace the challenges, and never stop learning and growing.
It's amazing how much of this comes back to mindset. Like what we believe, the stories we tell ourselves, it really does shape what happens.
Oh, absolutely. It's the foundation, really.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most empowering things I've learned is we get to choose what we believe. We can challenge those beliefs that hold us back and swap them out for beliefs that help us move forward.
It's like upgrading your operating system. You're rewriting the code that runs your thoughts, your feelings, your actions.
Exactly. And that's where questioning our assumptions comes in. We often just go through life on autopilot, accepting beliefs and ideas without really thinking about them. But when we take a step back and ask, why do I believe this, or is this even true? We open up so many possibilities. It's funny, you said earlier that we question all our beliefs, except the ones we really believe, and those we never think to question. And it's so true. It's those deep down beliefs, the ones we're not even aware of, that have the biggest impact on us.
Yeah, it's like the air we breathe. We don't even realize it's there till it's gone.
So how do we even become aware of those unconscious beliefs? How do we bring them into the light and start questioning them?
I think it starts with being curious, being willing to challenge the way things are, wanting to see the world from different angles, surrounding yourself with people who think differently than you, people who make you question your own beliefs.
It's about breaking out of your bubble and getting exposed to new ideas, new perspectives.
Exactly. And it's also about paying attention to that voice in your head. What's it saying? Is it encouraging you, supporting you, or is it holding you back with doubt and fear?
It's about catching yourself when you're thinking negative thoughts and making a conscious effort to think more positive, more powerful thoughts.
Right. And it's not about pretending that things are perfect or ignoring the challenges. It's about making a choice to focus on the good, on what's possible, on finding solutions.
It's about changing your perspective.
Yeah.
Going from a mindset of scarcity to one of abundance.
And I think that shift in perspective is what really leads to success, not just in business, but in life in general.
It's about realizing that you're not just along for the ride in your own life. You're the driver. You're the one in control.
Yeah, and you have the power to shape your reality, to make it into something truly amazing.
That's a really powerful thought to end on. This has been an amazing deep dive. I know our listeners are going to get a ton out of it, and they'll be ready to take their entrepreneurial journey to the next level.
That's what I'm hoping for. It's been great talking to you.
And to our listeners, remember, the journey is just as important as the destination. So enjoy the ride, embrace those challenges, and never stop learning and growing.